Good morning. I'd like to call the Harnett County Board of Commissioners 2021 Planning Retreat to order and ask Ms. Stewart if she would give us a little overview and welcome this morning.
I'll be glad to, Chairman. So welcome to the 2021 Planning Retreat, those of you who are in attendance as well as those who are listening. This year's theme is Onward and Upward. The definition is toward a better condition or toward a higher level. My hope is that we will all work together to improve Harnett County and take it to a higher level for our citizens. May we always strive to achieve more and make a real difference in our community. So going to the agenda, we have a packed agenda, as you can see. There's important information that will be distributed and will assist you in your upcoming decision-making processes. Since I'm a former IT person, making decisions using data that backs them up is extremely important. So we'll start the day off with a year in review presentation by our staff. Following that, Renee Pascal and Lisa McFadden, who are our budget team, will be discussing our capital improvements plan in great detail. Renee will be joining us remotely today, so if you have any questions during the presentation, please raise your hand, allow me to call on you, and then speak clearly into your microphone so that Renee and the others can hear you. During the CIP presentation, we ask that you give each project a ranking on the score sheet that's in front of you, when we'll go over the details of the scoring sheet before we start that presentation. So depending on where we are on the agenda, since we've moved things around, for those of you listening, we will not have a closed session to start with. We're just going to jump straight into the year in review. We will have a working lunch followed by our fiscal policy, a revenue update, and a discussion on financial trends. And at the end of the day, we will discuss your goals and your priorities for 2021 and then wrap up. I'd like to thank everyone who participated in planning for the retreat, and we hope you will find the day productive and informative. So Commissioner McCoy, I'll turn it over to you for the pledge and invocation.
Let's all stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This morning, we're going to do something a little different. Our theme is onward and upward. And I want each and every one of you to bow your head and speak to the Lord in your own way as to how we accomplish this for the next fiscal year. So let's bow our heads. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
So now I'll turn it over to Brian Haney, who's going to start the year in review.
Good morning. Good morning. As we do every year, we want to provide you with a summary of some of the county's accomplishments from the past year. We asked all county departments to provide their top accomplishments from 2020 and have compiled them into a single document for your review, which I believe everyone has at their seat. I would like to go over a few of the top county-wide priorities from this list, and you'll find them starting on page 2 of the document. It goes without saying that the COVID-19 pandemic has been the most significant event of the past year, both for the county as a whole and for Harnett County government. We believe it is a considerable accomplishment that the county was able to continue providing essential services to our citizens during a global pandemic. Our goal from the beginning has been to continue providing a high level of customer service to our citizens while implementing measures designed to keep county staff and the public safe. We have tried to do this virtually when possible, so long as this does not negatively affect the quality of the services provided. Our entire workforce has come together and stepped up during this difficult time. The Health Department and Emergency Services have been on the front lines responding to COVID. The Health Department has led the charge in terms of coordination, testing, contact tracing, and more recently, vaccinating the public. Emergency Services has continued to play a leading role on the emergency management side in planning and coordinating with our partners and working to obtain much-needed PPE for our first responders. EMS has also continued responding to calls for service, as has the Harnett County Sheriff's Office and their road deputies. Additionally, the Sheriff's Office has maintained the Harnett County Detention Center, which has been made even more difficult by the pandemic. Others on the front lines of the pandemic include social services caseworkers who have continued to make home visits, and our Hart's drivers who have continued transporting citizens to important medical appointments. Other departments have opened their doors to the public in limited numbers or by appointment only to provide enhanced services. These include social services, the Harnett County Public Library, which also implemented a popular curbside pickup option, the Harnett County Tax Office, and the Harnett County Register of Deeds. The Harnett County Board of Elections held a record-breaking general election during the pandemic. In total, 58,446 people cast ballots, or 71% of all registered voters in the county. The Board of Elections processed more than 12,000 absentee by mail ballot requests, which was a 600% increase over the 2016 general election. The board also maintained 4 one-stop early voting locations, implementing new procedures and policies to prevent the spread of COVID during early voting and on Election Day. None of the things I've mentioned could have been done without Harnett County facilities. Custodial staff have continued cleaning and maintaining county offices with the added requirements regarding COVID, and facilities maintenance staff have also outfitted many county buildings with plexiglass barriers, hand sanitizing stations, and other items to protect employees from the spread of COVID. Also on the COVID front, the county has been responsible for managing $5.1 million in CARES Act funding from the Coronavirus Relief Fund, or CRF. We have worked with the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office, or NPPRO, and the U.S. Treasury Department to maximize the use of these funds, putting them towards the payroll and benefits of public safety employees who are considered substantially dedicated to addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. This has allowed us more flexibility to use these displaced funds to address COVID-19. Primary expenditures have included purchasing face coverings and gloves for employees, purchasing hand sanitizer and disinfectant to clean county spaces, installing plexiglass barriers, and implementing other measures to protect employees and the public and limit the spread of COVID-19. The bulk of the county CRF allocation, approximately $2 million, has been committed to expanding broadband infrastructure for the county, which has been the board's top priority for several years, but has taken on additional significance during the COVID-19 pandemic with more widespread teleworking and virtual learning. We also provided $1.27 million of the county CRF allocation to our 5 municipalities and have met regularly with our municipal managers to coordinate expenditures and reporting. In addition to the county CRF allocation, a number of other county departments have also received COVID-related grant funding, including the Board of Elections, EMS, Harnett Regional Jetport and Harts, the Health Department, the Public Library, the Sheriff's Office, and Social Services. This year also saw the implementation of a significant building project, construction of the Harnett County Resource Center and Library. This project was intended to address increased service demand related to Harnett County's rapidly growing population. It also furthers the county's master plan by bringing more county departments to a single government campus in order to more effectively and efficiently serve our citizens. In August of 2020, we saw the completion of an expansion to the Department of Social Services, which allowed for the relocation of child support services from a rented facility in Irwin and brought the entire department under a single roof. The expansion also includes shell space to accommodate future growth for the department. Construction of the Harnett County Resource Center and Library also moved forward. The facility includes a new modern location for the Harnett County Public Library, which had outgrown its current location and needed additional space to meet the public's demands for expanded programming and services. The facility also includes a new home for Harnett County Veteran Services adjacent to the Harnett County Veterans Memorial Park, along with a new home for Harnett County Parks and Recreation, the county's administrative offices, and a new Board of Commissioners chambers. Additionally, there is a 4,000 square foot training space that can accommodate nearly 550 people and with additional capacity for approximately 800 people, obviously once the pandemic is over, that will provide much needed training and other opportunities for county employees and the public. County staff will be moving into this new facility later this week, with the public library reopening sometime in March. The project also includes a number of on- and off-site improvements, including additional parking in the government complex, along with enhanced connectivity throughout the complex, and a new driveway entrance off of McKinney Parkway. Moving on to fiscal accomplishments, the county implemented a software transition of its HR payroll software to Tyler Munis, which was a partnership between the Finance Department, IT, and Human Resources. This transition will expand the county's capabilities related to budget forecasting and producing reports related to HR payroll. The county also completed a debt refunding that resulted in long-term savings of $2.9 million for the general fund and $1.1 million for the utilities enterprise fund. Additionally, the county received approval from the LGC to issue $27.5 million in general obligation bonds for the construction of a new Irwin Elementary School to replace the former school, which is currently ongoing. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, the county made significant progress on expanding broadband by partnering with the ISP Cloudwise to extend infrastructure to underserved areas of the county. This project is currently moving forward, and we anticipate the first residents being able to access this new infrastructure later this year. In addition to these accomplishments, page 3 of the 2020 Year in Review document includes some notable departmental accomplishments, and the pages that follow include a more detailed account of all the accomplishments that were submitted by the county's departments for your review. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And as y'all can see, we've had a very successful year. 2020 was tough, but our employees, thanks to the hard work of the employees, we overcame the trying times of the pandemic and were able to deliver services as well as accomplish all the goals that we were in motion. So we're real proud. I'd like to say I'm proud of all the employees. I'd like to thank them for all their hard work, especially even our staff, because it's been a tough, John Rouse, Larry Smith, all the people involved with COVID-19. So just as on that note, I'll just tell you that last week, we had over 17,000 calls for the vaccine. So just so you know, we're monitoring that. We're having to put more staff to answering phones and answering emails. So kudos to everybody that's working so hard. So thank you, Brian. Moving on, we're going to go to the capital improvement plan, and I'll introduce Renee Pascal, who's joining us remotely, and then Lisa McFadden, who's on site. So y'all take it away.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You can, thank you.
I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I tested positive for the flu yesterday, so I didn't want to give that to you all. This is our recommended 2022-2028 capital improvement plan. We plan our capital needs out for 7 years. We presented this originally on November 10th and held a public hearing on November 16th. But because of the board changeover, we wanted to delay the work session and approval until the new board was seated. This is a long presentation. We will move quickly unless you have questions. We may not cover every point on a slide, but I will note that there are a lot of updates because of the time lapse, and we will try to apprise you of those. And finally, I'll say that the two more things, sorry. The presentation has also been updated as Lisa and I were going through, making our notes and getting ready. We found a few things that needed to be changed, so it won't match your handouts exactly. And then finally, I want to define a fiscal year. We are currently in fiscal year 2021, and I call that fiscal year 21. So that is how we will reference the fiscal year throughout the presentation. Next slide.
Okay, our overview, we're going to review the legal framework for the CIP. We're going to review the CIP process that we went through for fiscal year 22 through 28. We're going to go over the proposed CIP process going forward, the funding strategy, the reader's guide, action summary, the projects, and our next steps, including the board prioritization. So each of you have a CIP score sheet on your right in front of you. The prioritizations, we're going to rate them 3 through 0. 3 being the most important, which is what we're going to consider imperative, something that you must do to correct danger or public health and safety, meet legal obligations, or alleviate services facility deficiencies, or prevent irreparable damage. A score of number 2 is something that you should do, something to replace obsolete facilities, stimulate economic growth, reduce future operating costs, or leverage grants. A score of 1 is something that's just important, something you could do, provide new expanded services, promote intergovernmental cooperation, or reduce energy use, or enhance cultural and natural resources. And a score of 0 is just something that you don't want to do. The legal framework for capital budgeting, it's not legally required, but if it is done, general statutes charge the county manager with preparation. And the governing board, if you do it, you have to adopt adopt a project ordinance if it's used, establish capital reserve funds if it's used. And the CIP plan is not a budget and does not authorize spending. So how do we go about budgeting the CIP projects? There's different ways to do this. Some jurisdictions take the CIP project and turn the year one into the budget. We can budget through the operating budget, and these are usually projects that can be completed in one fiscal year. Or through the separate project ordinance, and those usually extend multiple fiscal years.
So if a CIP is not legally required, why should you do it? In my experience over my career, you'd be amazed at how seeing everything in front of you at one time improves your decision making. Not only can you decide among competing projects, but you can also see how projects overlap, and you can also match that to grant opportunities that come available. I'd also urge you to use the CIP as your decision-making tool and not approve projects without that context. It helps us see, next slide. It helps us see the cumulative financial impacts of the project, both the what must be accumulated in capital reserve, what must be issued through debt, and also the operating impacts, because we also include those. It helps you see, what makes sense to do first, second, and that kind of thing. And it also offers time to kind of consider all of the options. Many of the projects will enter the CIP as a future project, which means it's not funded, but it is something on the horizon. And you have a lot of time to scrutinize those projects. And I think the one that I think is probably the best example of this, last year IT submitted an up to the radios, our Viper radios, and the Sheriff's Office submitted a project to replace the Viper radios. And we looked at both of those projects and decided that the smarter thing to do would be to replace the radios, since Motorola will no longer serve them or service them. So you'll see that when we get to that particular project. Next slide. So this year we made a few improvements. I think the most substantial improvements were including Harnett County Schools and Central Carolina Community College in our process. Counties are required to construct their capital facilities and provide their capital outlay, and so this is critical to include them. We didn't last year because it was our first year, and we had a lot of work to do to get ready. CIP projects include everything that results in a tangible asset with a useful life of 10 years and costs $100,000 or greater. You'll see a few exceptions to this in the CIP. The process is separated from the operating budget process, which occurs in the spring. The CIP is prepared in the fall, and it allows us to focus on that. And then departments provide a written justification of the project, the operating costs, and the project budget in today's dollars. We also require a reliable cost estimate, and if that is not included, then the project may be recommended as a future project. Next slide. We take the projects that are based on today's dollars and we inflate them uniformly. Non-construction is inflated 3% a year, and with construction we've been using, I think last year we used 12% and then 6%. This year we used 6%, and I will acknowledge that I'm not really sure if that's enough. The are vetted by an internal team, so when a department proposes a project, we assemble a team made up of finance, Harnett Regional Water, Development Services, Facilities, IT, and the manager and two assistants. And we scrutinize that project, and we ask the department a lot of questions and then tell them how we think they should best justify it, as well as the impacts that it will have on those internal departments. So for every project that is included, scheduled with dollars in the CIP, there is a funding source identified. The goal is to fund pay-as-you-go projects up front. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We're unsure that can be done for the entire plan, and the plan would need to be adjusted based on the particular year revenues and expenditures. But we are somewhat comfortable that the 2022 projects can be funded. Future projects that I've already mentioned include those that have no funding source available. So you'll see quite a few school projects that will require debt to fund, and so those are as future projects because we haven't decided the best strategy to do that. The scope that was presented by the department needed some refinement, or the cost estimate was either not present or needed some refinement. Next slide. Our future process, we're going to hopefully focus on project management, which means tracking the key milestones for activities of the project and reporting on those. And we would like to, at some point, include utilities in the CIP process so that we have one unified document and our CIP process is more transparent to the public. Next slide. Our funding strategy was to try to use other people's or other entities' funds as much as possible and therefore reduce the burden on the taxpayers. So for the airport projects that are recommended, you will see that the Department of Transportation Division of Aviation is funding a good chunk of those. We applied for and received a Partis grant for one of our parks projects. We've leveraged other revenue sources like 911 funds for our CAD and dispatch software replacement. We applied for the GREAT grant, I think Brian mentioned, but we did not receive it this year, but we will reapply for that next year, and that's for the broadband project. We want to reserve our existing debt capacity to pay for your most important priorities. And except for the schools and CCCC, we did estimate operating costs to develop an overall financial model. I will say that the schools had quite a bit of work to do this year, and so that was one piece that we did not do. Next slide. So we're attempting to pre-fund our pay-as-you-go projects as the operating budget allows, as I said earlier, through a contribution to capital reserve. So the Viper project, which is in year 4 of the CIP, cost about $2.6 million, and we will be funding $515,000 a year beginning in the current year. What this does is allows us to spread out the accumulation of funds so that we don't take a major hit. And this is one of our most expensive pay-as-you-go projects. And then we also recommend that we continue the appropriations to the special funds for parks, sheriff, and fleet. Next slide.
And in our recommended CIP, we have the funding source table. It's on page 12 and 13. And this table just summarizes all our funding sources by project year. And the major sources of revenue are installment or other debt, capital reserve, and grants. In our operating impact, this is also a table that summarizes the combined effect of the operating budget on the recommended projects through the 7 years. We do spend a good amount of time working with the departments to identify these costs. And we should have a handle on how the projects will impact the operating budget, especially when time moves forward, when it's time to move forward. We hope to do this with the schools next year. The Reader's Guide.
Next is the Reader's Guide, and so Lisa, can you point to things as I call them out? So the first thing is the project status, and in some cases that's been updated from the document, and I will try to note that where it is. Next is project elements, which are the expenses, funding sources, which are the revenues, and operating effect, the impact on the operating budget. You'll notice a column that says budget and a column that says project totals. So if a project has been approved in a prior CIP or by separate actions like the broadband project, then the budget column will be filled out. If the project is entirely new, the budget column will be blank, indicating there was no prior budget. And so the difference between budget and project totals is the increase or decrease in the project. And once the CIP is adopted, then that project total column becomes the budget. Next slide. In your document, you'll see that the projects are grouped by action. So new projects, approved no contracts, approved contract split, and so on. This is organized by the amount of discretion you, the Board of Commissioners, has to change the project. So if the major contract in the project has been let, like a construction project, then you have very little discretion to stop that project. But for new and projects that have not had a contract let, then you have discretion. For some projects, there's kind of a set of projects that are rolling, like replacement of ambulances. You have discretion not to do future ambulance replacements, although that's probably not a good idea. But you do have discretion for things that are in the future, as long as the major contract has not been let.
And Renee, let me stop you one second, Renee. So the board, Renee is referring, and Lisa, to our capital improvement plan that we gave you in November. Gina just went to make a copy of it for you, so you can refer to it as we go. We failed to tell you to bring yours, so we'll make you a new copy. Okay, Renee, you can keep going. Sorry.
Okay, next slide. So I will say that the Harnett County Board of Education, or the superintendent rather, asked that we reference the Board of Education's priority in the CIP. So you'll find that reference both in the introduction and then also in the presentation throughout the document. The tiers are, tier 1 means that the Board of Education thinks that the project is needed immediately to 1 year. Tier 2 is 2 to 4 years. Tier 3, 5 to 9 years. Tier 4 is 10 to 15 years, and then Tier 5 is prioritized as funding is available. So you'll see between this slide and the next slide, those things broken out. All right, getting into the project. So as I said, we're going to review projects as they are grouped. These are the completed projects, which means we want to be transparent and accountable to the board and let you know how we did in budgeting for these projects. There are projects that had spending in the previous year. I will be reviewing the projects that have been in the capital improvement plan for a couple of years, because I've coordinated the process. Lisa really focused on, as the budget director, she focused on the new projects and the future projects, and she wrote most of the narratives for those. Next slide. The first project that is completed is the Boone Trail School demolition. Fire destroyed the building. It was under budget. You see the final cost was $231,395, and the budget was $239,000. Next slide. Next slide. This is a picture of the Boone Trail School site after the building was demolished. Next slide. This project was lighting the fields at Western Harnett Middle and Harnett Central tennis courts. It was completed in December of 2019. It was $411,000 and on budget, and you'll see increased operating costs for electricity and revenue for field rental. Next slide. Approved contract split. So these projects have been approved in a prior CIP or by another board action. You have very little discretion to change or remove the project without a great deal of expense. The main contract has been executed, but you are able to postpone expenses for future phases. So some things like parks are broken into future phases. The Harnett Resource Center and Library and Resource Center is a good example. It will open next month, and so it's not something that you can not do. Next slide. 911 dispatching software replacement. $441,000 in the current fiscal year is partially funded by 911 funding. We estimate about $197,000 of the expenses will be covered. The rest is coming from the Viper reserve. So when we implemented Viper in 2013, we had some leftover funds, and we will use those funds for this. Software hasn't been upgraded in 20 years. The go-live date has been postponed from November to January or February, or late January or early February, to give us time to work out a couple of issues. Next slide. Here you see our telecommunicators busily dispatching calls. Next slide, using the software. The next project has already been mentioned a couple of times. That is the broadband expansion initiative for unserved and underserved areas of the county. As Brian mentioned, $2 million in fund balance technically was allocated to the project. We applied for the GREAT grant, did not receive it this year, but we'll reapply. This has been a top county priority, and what our $2 million will do is build out the engineering and construction costs to install the fixed wireless equipment on various towers in the county. And the GREAT grant, if awarded, would extend the fiber beyond where it currently ends. Next slide. Next project is the emergency radio system, replacing the tower, and it's on Oak Ridge Road. So the new tower is being built on the future site of a collection center and park, and those three things will be co-located. The cost is $830,000, and it's projected to be under the budget of $919,000. It's also being funded from that leftover Viper money I mentioned earlier. We're removing the old tower and constructing a new one. The main reason is because the property owner that leases us the land had imposed some conditions that we did not find acceptable, and the existing tower is in poor condition. The tower is designed and bid, and the completion date is projected to be March 1st. We will we've already terminated the lease, but it will be ending on August 31st of 2021. Next. The Harnett County Resource Center and Library and DSS addition, located across McKinney Parkway, cost $26.3 million. We also received a bond premium. Those are funds that we don't have to repay, of $3.8. We borrowed just under $21 million. We are transferring money from the general fund to the tune of $1.3 million, and then we also had some interest. The temporary certificate of occupancy was issued at the end of the year, and we expect the final CO final occupancy permit to be next week. And this also includes some off-site improvements. Our costs go up because we expanded library services. It's a larger facility than what we currently have, and we need to clean and maintain the facility as well as heat and cool it. And the decreased costs result from the county offices being able to move out of rental space. Next slide. The next two slides are pictures of the Resource Center and library. Next slide. The next project is record software replacement. This is scheduled to be done this year. It's projected to be on budget. It's $140,000. It's funded from asset forfeiture funds, which is property that is seized and sold, and we keep the proceeds or part of the proceeds from it. The existing software has not been upgraded in 20 years, and the software went live on November 3rd. There are no increased operating costs because we basically upgraded with the current vendor. Next slide. The next project is Irwin Elementary, which will replace actually Irwin and Gentry Elementary. Gentry is projected to be converted into a staff development center, but major renovations are not expected and were not requested through the CIP. This $31 million, a bond premium of $3.9 million helps pay for it. The school is projected to open in early calendar 2020. Next slide. The next project is Cape Fear Shiner. It's under budget. About of it was funded through the Cardiff grant. It's the first phase of this park and included constructing 2 multi-use fields, 2 baseball and softball fields, and 3.5 miles of walking trails. I will say the CIP document is wrong in the amount of the grant. It should be $400,000 not 404,001. The park opened at the end of October of 2020, and there are increased operating costs for staffing and maintenance. Next slide. Patriots Park Phase 1. So when we opened, this is co-located with the Collection Center. When we had the public hearing on the Collection Center, the community interest indicated an interest in having a park. So this is Phase 1. The estimated cost is $411,000. It's over what's in the document, which is $404,537 because some things were left out of the original cost estimate, like installing the box culvert. It's also over last year's budget, which was $347,000 because of bad soil and the need to meet the grant deadline for Cape Fear Shiner. So our Parks and Rec staff does a lot of the improvements themselves, but they had to pull staff off of this project and hire contractors so that they can meet the grant deadline for Cape Fear Shiner. And as you see, that project is under budget by $42,000. This project is over budget by $64,000. Both are being funded. Both of the county's portion are being funded from the Parks Capital Reserve. And the project is nearly complete. Next slide. So Phase 2, we're immediately going into Phase 2. That includes a picnic shelter and playground. Again, those were based on facilities that the public said that they wanted. Our projected completion date is February 20 of 21. This is also being funded from the Parks Capital Reserve. I should have said on Phase 1, there are increased operating costs for maintenance and staffing. And in fact, the staffing will be shared between Cape Fear Shiner and Patriots Park. Next slide. The next project is the radio frequency identification installation for the library. This tags all of the library materials and allows the automation of checking things out, doing inventory, better theft control, and it allows staff to focus on other duties. The project received a 75% grant from state libraries, and our portion of the project was just shy of $25,000. We also saved $18,000 in equipment for the new library. So really the net cost of this project to the county was $6,541. There are some increased operating costs for software maintenance and tags for materials. Next slide. And then the final project with contract let is our tax reappraisal. This is one of the exceptions that I noted. This requires, state law requires us to set aside the funding for revaluation each year into a reappraisal fund. We approved the contract with Vincent Valuations in June of 2019 at a cost of $2,070,000, and we're required to make an annual contribution of $690,000 over 3 fiscal years. This is coming from the general fund. These reappraised values will be effective for fiscal year 2023. Next slide. Bulldozer. Not the last one. So this one was grouped under no contracts, but actually it's been purchased already. It's coming from the Solid Waste Capital Reserve. It was ordered in July and delivered in November. Next slide. So the next set of projects are approved, but the main contract for the project has not been executed, and it was either in last year's CIP or has been approved by the board separately. The manager is recommending these projects, but you, the Board of Commissioners, have discretion to change, delay, or delete these projects, realizing that some costs, like design costs, may have already been incurred. Next slide. Board of Elections voting equipment. This has been in the news recently. We purchased our equipment in 2006, as many counties in the state did, and it's nearing the end of its useful life. It's going to be harder and harder to find replacement parts and the like. What's in the capital improvement plan is $334,000 in fiscal year 22 coming from capital reserve, and it's based on the most expensive option. The State Board of Election had certified 3 vendors, and one of those has withdrawn. The 2 vendors are Hart and ES&S. The Board of Elections has to go through a 5-step process to select the equipment, and that also includes a final recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. They want to buy the equipment so that it can be used in the 21 municipal elections and the tested in the 21 municipal elections, and then used for the first time live in the 2022 primary. Next slide. The next project is the Viper radio replacement that I've mentioned several times before. We originally bought all of our Viper radios in 2013, and so we have to upgrade our radios at a cost of about $300,000 to comply with the state's time division multiple access programming, which essentially divides each of the channels into 2 top paths, and that will reduce our need and the state's need for future frequencies. But in addition to that, the Motorola will no longer support our radios in 2023. So we recommend replacing our radios, and it will cost $2.75 million, with $2.5 coming from capital reserve and about $250,000 coming from the radio project capital reserve. We own quite a few radios. Initially, we purchased radios for the other entities, such as the towns and the fire departments. But we are not recommending that we do that this go-round. That would add $3 million to the project. We've communicated with all the fire departments and the towns that they will need to replace their radios on this time frame. And it's in all of our best interest to purchase the radios at one time, because we will get the best pricing. And as I said, this is a different figure from the previous slide, but we're contributing about $500,000 each year to capital reserve to fund it. I will note kudos to Emergency Management, who's applied for a grant which could cover $457,000 of the expense. Grants are usually available to fire departments and EMS agencies, but not to generally county. The next are emergency transport remounts. It's about $500,000 beginning last year. It's funded from capital reserve. What's in the CIP funds 5 units. It's cheaper with an ambulance, which is quite expensive, to remount the ambulance, which is basically replacing the chassis and renovating the box. And this is doing the remounts per our policy. It saves about $115,000 over the life of the vehicle to remount it instead of replacing it. And also the purchase of the convalescent vans last year reduced the need for future remounts. Yes. So the prior project and this project is related. So these are replacing actually the units, and we replace those at 15 years, or if the last remount reaches 200,000 miles or 225,000 miles. So this project increased about $1 million over last year because the number of new ambulances was not projected accurately. So this includes replacing 10 units, and the net cost there was savings on the remount and an increase in this project, and the net is about $600,000. Next slide. Our fleet management and replacement system, we've been contributing $200,000 a year. We started 5 years ago we started in 2019. It's funded from a capital transfer from the general fund. This replaces the county's non-emergency vehicles based on standard criteria that minimizes maintenance costs and maximizes resale values. This should allow us to replace every non-emergency vehicle once, and then we are now leasing those vehicles to departments, and those lease payments will fund the future replacements, and we're currently working on a model to make sure that that is the case. Next slide. The sheriff has a pot of money that we contribute to, $450,000 a year. It started in 2016, and I think the first contribution was more than the $450,000. It's primarily used to fund cars, but you'll see that we recommend using it to fund other CIP needs as well. If you net out what is earmarked for the CIP and the cars that are planned for the current year, there's about $200,000 left in that fund. Next slide. So one of those projects is replacing the detention center security intercom system. It's scheduled for this year at a cost of about $131,000. It's already been subtracted from that $200,000 balance. The jail opened 11 years ago, and so some of the equipment is aging, and parts are no longer available to repair it. There are no increased costs because it has the same vendor. The next slide, the video surveillance system, sorry, getting tongue-tied. So this is like the previous slide. It's 11 years old. Parts are starting to fail, and they're no longer made by the manufacturer. Again, this is no increased cost, and this is recommended for next fiscal year. Next slide. Northwest Harnett Elementary School is to construct a 120,000 square foot school on Rollins Road to alleviate overcrowding at Lafayette Elementary. The estimated cost, though we haven't bid the project yet, is $37.8 million. And that's to be funded from general obligation bonds, the ones that were approved in 2014, Harnett Regional Water, and lottery proceeds paid for the land purchase. The project is expected to be bid in mid-March, and then we would sell bonds sometime in May. And the school is projected to open in in school year 2022-23. The next project is the Harnett Regional Jetport Airfield Lighting Rehabilitation. This is $2.2 million, and it includes replacing the Automated Weather Observing System, or AWOS. The project was deemed important by the Division of Aviation, who has paid for 100% of the design and will pay for 100% of the construction administration. normally the cost share is they will pay 90%. We'll pay 10% of the construction cost, and we will fund that from the airport capital reserve. The lighting shorts out all the time, not all the time, but frequently, and it was installed without conduit, which causes the shorts. A properly functioning lighting system is important to flight safety. This project was actually bid in December of 2020, and the bids came in under budget, and our overall cost will be reduced by $42,000. DOT has not yet released the funds. The next project is also Harnett Regional. This is an expansion of the apron. It's $3.7 million with construction in 2023. This one is funded as is typical, 90% by the Division of Aviation and 10% from us, coming from the capital reserve and our general capital reserve. The airport capital reserve and our general capital reserve. It expands the size of the apron to 144,000 square feet and strengthens the existing pavement. It provides 9 additional parking spaces for 9 additional planes and better passenger loading and unloading. Right now, larger aircraft. I'm sorry, go back, please, Lisa. Right now, larger aircraft block the access to the runway and to the airport services. Also, the FAA does not allow direct access between the terminal and the runway, which is the case now. And we've gotten an update from DOA that says they may release funds in July of 2021 or fiscal year 22. The next slide, please. This shows a drawing of the work to be done. The lighter blue is where the pavement is being expanded. The darker blue is where it's being overlaid. And you can see the circulation of planes that it allows more parking. It allows planes to enter and exit without impeding traffic, and does not allow direct access to the runway. Next slide. We recommend continuing our $200,000 annual contribution to the Parks and Recreation Reserve, which began in 2018. It provides a stable source to fund small and sometimes, frankly, quite large projects with the county's parks, because we're leveraging our staff to do a lot of the work. And the funding supports or could support just about every park in the capital improvement plan. Next slide. We recommend a contribution to a capital reserve to start constructing greenways. There are quite a few grants available, so we'd be able to leverage those funds to obtain grants. We're currently deficient 26 miles of greenway, and we're projected to be deficient 36 miles by 2030. When we had public input on the comp plan and the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, this was one of the top priorities that the public identified. We recommend $100,000 for 5 years and then $250,000 thereafter. And the Greenway Plan was complete and presented to the Board of Commissioners on January 19th. Next slide. The Social Services and Commons area roof replacement is scheduled for next year, funded from Capital Reserve. A couple of years ago, the health roof, which was constructed at the same time, leaked and caused serious damage. And so replacement of this roof is necessary, and the work will include a 20-year warranty. So This project, I think we only have one project in this category. It means part of the work is complete, but the board could forego doing the remaining work. So the one project that we have in this category is Ben Haven school renovation. Next slide. So we've done work to stabilize the former Ben Haven Elementary School to prepare for an early college and future use by county departments and the community. The funds really just stabilize and start getting things ready. They don't get to a point of completion, except maybe in a couple of cases. The community supports preserving and revitalizing the campus. There's a mistake in the slide. It should say $602,000 in GO bonds. So we're able to use general obligation bonds approved in 2014 to undertake the work that's for the early college. And we're also funding it from capital reserve, Harnett Regional Water, and the general fund. This is a diagram of the site as we received it from the school system. The building in red has been demolished to create additional parking that's required. The gym, yeah, I can't. Can you point to the gym, Lee?
Right here.
The gym is the location of the future location of the early college. The future work that is planned includes replacing the media center roof, which is building number 2, and replacing the windows in building number 1, which is the main 2-story building on campus. Next slide.
Okay, so our new projects, these are the projects that have not been approved in a previous CIP. They may have been listed as a future project. The manager is recommending these projects, but you have complete discretion about timing and whether or not to fund these. So the first one is our Central Carolina Community College parking lot resurfacing. This is about 10,000 square feet and 4 parking lots that still need to be resurfaced. It was eliminated in 2019 because of budget constraints. It's necessary to prevent complete deterioration of the pavement, and it's requested in fiscal year 22, and it's about $160,000. And it will be funded from capital reserve. The next one is emergency medical services, the cardiac monitor replacement. In 2027, they'll be at their end of their 10-year useful life. The monitors can't be upgraded, and it's about $611,000, and it'll be reserved or funded from capital reserves. We want to replace them all at the same time because it causes staff confusion and errors if there's multiple technology in the field at one time. Our next one is the convalescent transport unit replacements. These need to be replaced once every 3 years, starting in fiscal year 23. And in fiscal year 26, we need to replace the stretchers. And this is about $675,000 between fiscal year 23 and 28. And replacing these once every 3 years will result in $260,000 over a 15-year period, and it's going to be because of the insurance, maintenance, and fuel costs. The next one is the old jail demolition and relocation of building systems. This is going to be funded this year, and it's about $430,000 funded from capital reserves. It's electrical, mechanical, and plumbing systems that are shared with the former jail. There's mold and water infiltration. The project's going to require a temporary relocation of emergency management, DMV, and the highway patrol offices for about 3 months. The design is complete, and the bid is to be awarded this fiscal year, and it's about a 3-month construction schedule. And you can see here, it's the grayed out part that's going to be demolished. The next one is the Harnett County Schools camera upgrade. They're going to finish upgrading the security cameras to digital technology at 7 schools. It's already been installed at all the other schools. And this is going to be $320,000 in fiscal year '22. The CIP recommended funding from lottery proceeds, but those may not be available, and the time frame may need to be adjusted. The current security cameras are obsolete and replacements are not available. And the Board of Education has categorized this as a Tier 1 project. The next one is electronic door locks. This is going to be replaced on 58 doors at 17 schools. It's about $395,000 in fiscal year '22. The CIP recommended funding from lottery proceeds, but those may not be available either, and we may have to adjust the time frame. New locks will be electronic and can be controlled remotely, and this is also a Tier 1 project for the school board. We'll also make a note that these door locks have been replaced on all the main entrances at the schools. This is just to replace the locks on side doors and back doors. The next one is the Harnett County Schools, Johnsonville Elementary Schools Phase 1 expansion and renovation. In Phase 1, it's going to demolish and replace the cafeteria with a 9,500 square foot building, demolish the old CTE classroom building, and renovate 9,000 square foot of the gym. And this is roughly $5.1 million funded from the Benhaven GO bond proceeds. Construction is expected to begin sometime this summer. And Phase 2 is a future project that will include construction of a 27,500 square foot classroom, and it's going to replace the building that's been demolished. Renee? Okay, I'll go ahead. For the maintenance fund, the CIP currently recommends $1.4 million annual contributions to the beginning of fiscal year '22 for replacement of the HVA systems and roofs. Would have provided you got it?
Sorry,
Oh,
I
go
was
ahead.
muted.
Go ahead.
I was muted. So this annual contribution would have provided a reliable source of funding for the schools to undertake maintenance projects and maybe, hopefully, to be more proactive in the future. But with the possible elimination of lottery proceeds, we will have about $1 million shortfall in revenue. And so we will need to adjust this to $400,000 a year if the lottery proceeds, if we have that shortfall. And this would still be increasing their capital outlay appropriation, or their overall capital appropriation by $400,000 a year. So our fiscal policy says that we use the lottery proceeds for capital outlay. We don't want to reduce their general capital outlay. So the only place that we can think to take it is from this maintenance fund. Next slide.
Okay, the next one is Harnett Regional Jetport, the master plan update. The last plan was updated in 2005, and this plan will include an up-to-date airport layout plan, which an airport layout plan is required to receive grants. And $415,000, well, this is actually, it's going to be $415,000 funded from grants and $10,000 local match from Capital Airport Reserve. This will be phased over 3 years beginning this fiscal year. And this was approved at the board meeting on January the 19th. The amount is less than what's shown in the CIP after the costs were negotiated with the Division of Aviation and the county engineer. The next one is the information technology fiber extension. We'd like to construct a 1-mile fiber connection across the river from public utilities, actually from Alexander Drive over to public utilities. And this will provide a redundant loop for the county's core data network services and phone systems. And this is being requested in fiscal year 2028 for about $230,000, and it's funded from the capital reserves. The Parks and Recreation Ben Haven Community Park redevelopment. This will rehabilitate existing ball fields and playgrounds to construct a picnic shelter at the former Ben Haven School. This will address some of the requests or the recreation needs and the safety concerns. Some of those are like bad fences and rusty equipment. And it's about $140,000 funded in this fiscal year, and it's funded from Parks Capital Reserve. Patriots Park Development Phase 2 to construct a picnic shelter and a playground, which were also requested by the community. And this is almost $100,000 funded from Parks Capital Reserve, and this work is expected to be completed next month. The Shawtown Community Park Development. This development is develop its next set of planned improvements at the former Shawtown School, including a walking trail, fitness stations, playground, picnic shelter, and a community garden. The renovations of the North Classroom completed in 2019, and some of those things were the meeting space, the Boys and Girls Club, Reentry Family Services, the PAL program, and an outdoor basketball court and a parking lot. And this is about $130,000 that's funded this fiscal year from Parks Capital Reserve. The Solid Waste Northwest Convenience Center relocation. This is going to relocate the Northwest Convenience Center over to Oak Ridge Road, River Road. It's going to provide a larger and safer site to serve the growing population in that area. And that's about $500,000 in fiscal year 22. And it's going to be funded from Solid Waste Capital Reserves.
And before we go on, Renee, I just want to ask the board, do y'all have any questions about what we're doing? And then also, don't forget that at some point today, we need for you to score these projects, the 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, so that we can add that up and talk about it at the end. So I know I've seen you taking notes, so I'm hoping you're kind of starring the ones that are important to you or that kind of thing. So just know that at some point you do need to score these projects so that we can tally it up and figure out and talk about it at the end of the day in the discussion on priorities.
What was number 1? I have them down here, but I don't have them down.
One is imperative.
Imperative. Okay.
Yeah, Lisa can go back over that with you.
Yes, we can go back over that. Let me pull this up so I can read it to you correctly. So if it's imperative, we want to give that a score of a 3. If it's essential, something that you should do, give it a score of a 2. If it's important and something that you could do, give it a 1. And if it's something that you choose you don't want to do, just give it a 0.
And we'll keep your scores confidential. We won't. We're just going to tally them up at the end and just go down the list and tell you what the total score was, and just see if that's agreeable to the board. But and then we've got on here to take a break at 10:30. So I don't know if you'd rather break now before we get into future projects, or go ahead through the future projects and then take a break.
Pleasure, group.
Good now.
I think we're good.
Okay, we'll keep going. Thanks, Renee. Lisa.
Okay. Future projects. These are projects that are designed as future for any of the following reasons, such as we don't have a reliable cost, the scope is not well defined or could be defined further, and funds have not been identified to cover the cost, and these projects are not funded in the recommended CIP. The first one is the animal shelter replacement. The existing facility was built 25 years ago, and it's operating at maximum capacity. It currently has inadequate space and layout for treatment and testing of animals, food preparation, laundry and dishes, and adoption visitation. The current site is currently owned by Harnett Regional Water, and they're going to need the land in the next 5 to 6 years to expand their Northwest Wastewater Treatment Plant. And we still need to get a feasibility study done to determine the new location, the building needs, and costs. Central Carolina Community College, the drainage system repair. Their current system is over 40 years old. The college maintenance staff has determined the stormwater management system is failing, and the drain lines are undersized and needs to be replaced. A feasibility study needs to be done for future expansion of the campus, and a reliable cost estimate is recommended. This is something that we were also recommended that the college obtain a cost estimate for the study and request that as part of their fiscal year 22 operating budget. Next one is the courthouse shell space upfit. When the courthouse was constructed, there was additional 12,000 square foot of shell space that was built on the third floor for future courtrooms. But right now, the needs for the court offices have not yet been identified and prioritized. When the county's ready to move forward with the built-out of space, the feasibility study should be done to determine the needs and estimated cost. And that feasibility study is planned for this fiscal year.
And I want to just give you an update. I know we've spoken about this in the past, and we are reaching out now that our DA, clerk of court, district court judge will or have already changed. We'll need to have meetings with their staff to talk about these needs. So just did want you to know we are in discussion and plans, and also talking to others that may be interested in that space. So just as a follow-up, we are working on that actively.
The fleet maintenance facility improvement or a replacement. The existing garage is too small and it doesn't meet our service demands. A couple of the options that we're looking at is expanding the facility by constructing additional bays, replacing aging equipment only, or replacing the existing facility with a new garage, possibly in partnership with the Harnett County Schools, because they also need a new facility.
The next project is replacing Bowie's Creek Elementary School, and I'm going to do the debt-funded school project just to emphasize that we really need to first of all, we need to issue debt, and second, the Board of Education and the Board of County Commissioners need to have a joint work session, I believe, follow that planned, hopefully in May. We can meet in person to discuss future bond issuances and how they would be funded. Is that correct, Paula?
Yes, and as a follow-up, we got an email this morning from the Board of Education, and they are requesting May 3rd, and we were discussing the details of it, and that their board voted to have the joint meeting last night. So if you're so inclined, we can vote on Monday to add it for the May 3rd meeting.
Obviously, new school facilities will require the issuance of debt. This school was built in 1948, and it's currently slightly over capacity, which is projected to remain true over the next 7 years. It's a small site and it's landlocked, and this is categorized as a Tier 3 project, which means the next 5 to 9 years by the Board of Education. The schools have not obtained yet a cost estimate for this. Next slide, please. Next project is Highland Elementary School. The current school has 1,107 students with a rated capacity of 670 students. It is severely overcrowded, and it has 27 mobile units on site. This project would include a 40,000 square foot expansion of classroom space and a 2,000 square foot expansion of cafeteria space. This is categorized as a Tier 1 by the Board of Education, which means immediate to 1 year. We have received a at least a preliminary cost estimate of $16.6 million, and that would need to be issued. Next slide. Johnsonville, Lisa talked about Johnsonville Phase 1. This is Johnsonville Phase 2. You can see kind of the blue shaded area on the drawing. That would be a 27,500 square foot building that will replace the demolished CTE room. This is categorized as a Tier 1 by the Board of Education as well, which is immediate to 1 year. The cost estimate is $10 million, and obviously we would need to issue debt.
Oh, sorry, that's me. Lafayette Elementary School renovations. The current school was built in 1948 and it was added onto in 1957. After a portion of the students moved to the Northwest Harnett Elementary School, the board would like to renovate the school for a possible different uses. The exact nature of the renovations have not been determined, and this is classified as a Tier 2 project, which means in the next 2 to 4 years, and no cost estimate has been attained yet. The Harnett County Schools maintenance projects, when the cost estimates for these have been obtained, we'll consider funding the Overhills High School tennis court resurfacing project and the southwest windows replacement. And in the CIP, it also had listed the star windows, but that's actually also listed in a separate project.
The next project is the new South Harnett Lillington Middle School. It's envisioned that a new school of 1,200 students. It would alleviate existing and projected overcrowding at Harnett Central and Overhill Middle Schools. Harnett Central currently has 235 more students than its rated capacity, and the number of students is expected to increase by almost 200 in the next 8 years. And although not over its rated capacity yet, Overhill's Middle is projected to exceed its rated capacity by 129 students in the next 8 years. This is classified as a Tier 1 project by the Board of Education, meaning immediate to 1 year. The preliminary cost estimate of $55 million is based on similar schools in the region. We will need a detailed cost estimate to consider funding, and obviously we'll need to issue debt. A new South Harnett Lillington Highland High School is requested, and this is constructing a little over a 300,000 square foot high school to accommodate 1,850 students. And that would alleviate existing and projected overcrowding at Overhill and Harnett Central High School. Overhill High School currently has 220 more students than its rated capacity, and the number of students is projected to increase by 126 in the next 8 years. And though Harnett Central High School is not over its rated capacity, it's projected to exceed its rated capacity by 246 students in the next 8 years. This is classified as a Tier 1 project by the Board of Education. The preliminary cost estimate is $95 million based on similar schools built in the region. We will need a detailed cost estimate and need to issue debt for this project. Overhill's Elementary School expansion. Overhill is overcrowded as well. The rated capacity is 720 students, and the population is 876, and it's expected to grow by about 100 students over the next 8 years. There are 14 mobile units on site. The expansion would include 19,500 square feet of classroom space, which will replace those mobile units. It's classified as a Tier 1 project by the Board of Education. The cost is estimated to be about $6.8 million, the county will need to issue debt for that project.
And the next one is the Star Academy facility improvements. The Star Academy was originally built in 1925 and has numerous problems. The Board of Education would like to use the gym to host large meetings and other events. The project would address replacing windows and air conditioning in the gym, and you can see some of the issues right there in the picture, some rotting windows. This is also classified as a Tier 1 project by the Board of Education, but no cost estimates have been obtained. The Harnett County Schools Transportation Maintenance Facility replacement. The existing facility is too small to service all their buses and the other vehicles. Right now, they only have 6 bays and 12 are needed. They're actually requesting a replacement of the existing facility. The existing site will not accommodate any expansion, and a detailed cost estimate and funding source are still needed.
So by 2030, it's projected that county inmates will consume all available beds in the detention center. We are currently receiving between $250,000 and $1 million annually in revenue. And last year, the sheriff had proposed constructing an 8,750 square foot, 55-bed addition. So we did a study last year to see if this was financially feasible, and the study showed that the addition would cost the county between $2 and $7.1 million in debt service and operating costs after any revenue had been deducted over the next 10 years. So it isn't cost feasible to build beds, to house outside inmates, and continue to receive the revenue. It's also quite risky to do this because the revenue varies widely, and federal policies really have a huge impact on, whether there are federal inmates available to be housed. There are no guarantees, neither the state nor the feds will guarantee any sort of stream of inmates. So you take the risk of building the addition, and then it's possible that no inmates could, or fewer than projected inmates could show up. In addition, the politics of the federal level also play into this, and so with the changeover in the president, it's somewhat likely that federal incarcerations could drop, and we saw lower incarceration or lower federal inmates during the Obama administration than we did during the Trump administration. So the recommendation is to monitor local inmates and construct an addition when it's needed to house local inmates, not to house outside inmates.
Okay, and then the Harnett County Sheriff's Office is also requesting an evidence storage and crime scene processing bay. Their current evidence room is running out of space, and so they would like to construct an 1,800 square foot building to relocate the crime scene processing bay and create additional storage in that additional room as well. A reliable cost estimate still needs to be done for the site work before we can move forward.
The sheriff proposed replacing the generator that runs the 911 center, and it fully runs the 911 center, but it does not fully run the sheriff's office and the detention center. It does operate life safety, but not the heating and air conditioning. And they want to replace the 400 kilowatt generator with a 1,000 kilowatt generator. They didn't have a cost estimate before we finished the recommended CIP. So we also think that a second way to do this might be to add a second generator and retain the 400 kilowatt generator. That would be more cost effective because you could buy a smaller generator, and then by having two generators, you would have redundancy that you won't have with one generator. We should also explore using 911 funds for the cost of the generator. And I will say that even though the state regulations the state regulates the temperature that the detention center can be before inmates have to be moved. So I don't remember the specific temperature threshold, but we have not in the last 11 years had to move inmates because of this issue. The next project is the Harnett Regional Jetport Terminal construction. So this actually was a funded project 2 years ago, but then when we got the last cost estimate, it had increased by $824,000. The airfield lighting that we spoke about earlier had increased by almost $150,000, and the Division of Aviation had lowered the amount it was willing to commit by about $300,000. So I can't quickly do that math, but we were on the hook for more than $1 million than what we had originally projected. Our recommendation is that we seek additional state funds to help offset the cost of the terminal and not build it as it is currently funded by the state.
The next one is the HVAC control upgrade and standardization in multiple locations. Right now, the existing controls vary by type and use outdated software. If we standardize the controls, it would allow for better centralized management, more secure software platform, and a more efficient system operation. Currently, the admin building, chiller replacement, and construction of the Harnett Resource Center and Library include a control system that can be evaluated as a standard for county buildings on the main Lillington campus. Parks and Recreation, the Anderson Creek Park development, these are the future phases. Develop the remaining 800 acres to include equestrian, walking trails, mountain bike trails, and additional parking and a playground and a picnic shelter. Currently, the county has already developed 200 acres. No funding source has been identified yet, and the incremental development will occur when park funds become available. And just to note that there are 50 acres are reserved here for a future school site.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can anybody tell me what we have? What we have on site out there at the park? 'Cause it's been there for some time now.
Yeah, currently we have a playground, a picnic shelter, bathrooms, and walking trails, and a parking lot,
Okay.
paved parking lot.
Okay.
Parking lot paved or is it still gravel?
There, it's paved. The overflow is not paved, but the main one is paved. And that park gets a lot of use now that Raven Rock is overcrowded. A lot of people are going out there, so sometimes during COVID especially, it was like at capacity for walking trails. So that is something to consider going forward because there's so many undeveloped acres out there.
And the next one is the Boone Trail Park development to develop the 13.5 acres at the former school. The initial concept plan with the community input included a renovated entrance, a memorial walkway, an amphitheater, basketball court, picnic shelter, and a walking trail. The community center and the library are already there. The community has expressed interest in helping fundraise to make these things happen. But right now, no other funding source has been identified. The Cape Fear Shiner Park Development Phase 2. Phase 2 will include a playground, a picnic shelter, and a restroom facility. The design and reliable cost estimate is needed for the sewer septic system and a restroom facility. Next one is the Nils Creek Park Restroom Concession and Maintenance Building. Construct a new restroom, concession, and maintenance storage building. The athletic fields were built in 2018, and the tennis courts were relocated in 2019. The park has seen an increase in usage, so a restroom facility is being requested. Design and reliable cost estimate is needed for the sewer system and restroom facility. And $235,000 is available from the general obligation bonds, which was saved over from the lighting project from Nils Creek Park. The Nils Creek Park roadway construction. A new driveway would allow access to the park without going through the school's campus during the school hours. DOT would require construction of 2 turning lanes. A feasibility study and a cost estimate and a funding source are still needed. The Northwest Harnett Park development. Developed the park to be co-located with the new Northwest Convenience Center and Tower site. This was also noted during the public input for conditional use, so the community wants this park up there as well. The park would feature 2 baseball fields, a picnic shelter, a playground, a walking trail, and a fitness station. But we still need to identify a funding source for this. The public library mobile outreach vehicle. A mobile library could provide library services to currently underserved areas. The 2018 through 2023 Library Master Plan, it determined that the county is still largely rural, with 81% of the residents living outside an incorporated town. And it's reasonable to assume that accessing library services is challenging for segments of the county's population, because we know accessing the internet is a problem in many areas of the county. The library director proposes putting together a team to do extensive research on the vehicle's features before moving ahead with this purchase. And also the Western Harnett service expansion. The Library Master Plan found that approximately 48,000 residents lack adequate library services. Options for addressing this need include renovating an existing building or constructing a new building. A scope and a reliable cost estimate, as well as projections for staff and other operating costs, are needed before moving ahead with this project.
And let me back up, and Commissioner Nickel, I was wrong. That parking lot is not paved at Anderson Creek, and it does have a disc golf course there as well, or disc course. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, discussions, questions, and our next steps. What additional information do you need from us before we move ahead with the approval? And your prioritizations. We want you to take time to finish your score sheet and submit it to us so we can get it calculated to rate the board as a whole's prioritizations. Yes?
The DSS building, the expansion that was done on that, can someone tell me what's going on with the second floor that's just completely vacant? And I'm told that I guess they can't complete it.
Right. So when those buildings were done, that was just going to be shell space, just kind of like we did the 3rd floor courthouse for future growth. They still have capacity in the building they have. We're going to move, in fact, right now, we're working on a renovation project to change a file room to offices. So though that is needed in the future, you have to weigh it against all these other ones. And at the time of the submittal of this, they did not recommend it in the CIP. I think that everybody kind of thought, because we'd already done the building, we'd go ahead and finish it, but the funds have not been allocated and it's not been listed as a project. So the addition was built per plans with future growth for upstairs. And if you would like to have it on here as a future project, or, that's something that you'll need to put on the list for us. That's the type of thing we need to talk about now.
I don't know if you all have been over there, but I mean, it's just a second floor in a brand new building that's not finished at all, just has a concrete floor, exposed pipes everywhere. I mean, it's probably one of the most beautiful views in the county looking out with all the windows. However, it's not being utilized, so I figured probably need to use the space that we already have.
Anyone else have any questions you'd like to ask? Ms. Stewart, you can probably answer this question. I saw the resurfacing of the parking lot there for CCCC. Do we seal coat our parking lots? Do we have a schedule of maintenance for our parking lots?
I do not know. I'll need to check with CCCC Maintenance Department, because once we do something for them, then it's on them to maintain it. So I don't know if we do it or they do it, but we can check and get back to you.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to know, especially for county-owned parking lots, if we have a maintenance program where we try to keep them sealed every few years so they don't deteriorate quite as fast. Also, had a question about, I know, going back to several of the school system requests there for cameras, door locks, et cetera. The original plan, I guess, was to fund those through lottery funds. So I'm assuming where it says may not be available, that would go back to our decision to allow the school system to potentially accept that $10 million grant. Now, and if I'm correct, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the prior funding for capital needs for the county had been around $1 million, a little over $1 million. And so I know there was some discussion, help me understand, there was some discussion about maintenance fund at 1.4. Was that including that million that would normally be budgeted
Yes.
for capital projects? So by taking away that million, we'd now be talking about 400,000 for capital projects. Okay.
And again, this is one of the items that, for discussion and for your ranking, if you feel like that's if that's one of your goals, then that needs to make that known on this sheet so that we can, and when we start ranking them, we'll see where that ranks with all the board members.
Okay, and so that leads me to, on the ranking, now, we have projects listed as new, and then, of course, the future projects. Do we rank new as one ranking and future as one ranking, or all together?
All together. Whatever your rank is. So we'll group them, like if you look on the sheet we gave you, your score sheet, the top few are approved, but no contracts have been let. So that's going to be like one grouping. So if I were you in that grouping, I would rank those 0 through 4. Then take the next group of new and rank those 0 through 4. We'll break it into these 3 categories.
0 through 3.
I mean 0 through 3. We'll rank it in these 3 categories.
Okay.
So within, I guess what I'm saying is that within like the approved no contracts, you would do each one of those a 0 through a 3.
Okay, yes, that's my question. That's one group.
Right.
New is a second group. Future,
Yes.
third group.
Mhm.
Okay,
That's correct.
And one more question for me. That the roadway to Neals Creek Park, is that projected to come off of Highway 210? Would that be where that
It is.
entrance would
It's
come from?
right before that curve, and Campbell University did own that property. They have since sold it. We did have an easement through Campbell, so the easement should still be in effect with the new owners.
And on those, I think there was an agreement, I believe, between the school system and the county for the use of those 2 fields.
Correct.
Baseball and softball at Harnett Central
Correct.
Middle School.
Harnett County Schools owns the the county owns the regular Neals Creek Park, and then the school still owns the ball fields behind and the tennis courts behind the school system, but the county maintains all of them as part of Neals Creek Park.
Right, so that roadway would improve access to those 2 fields.
Exactly. And then
Plus
eventually.
cut out that traffic through the
Exactly.
school.
And then
Right.
put a parking lot over there through that access, so you wouldn't have to be parking on the school site to
Right.
get to the park.
Right, thank you for that.
This is Commissioner McCoy. Hey, I have a question, going back to the gentleman's question about the Social Service Department. Over there, the new facility that we build or add on to that. My thoughts were that we were building that facility to get the social service employees out of those buildings that we were paying all this rent for in Irwin, Dunn, whatever. But I thought that, too, that there was some discussion about moving some of the departments out of the original social service department to the top floor for space and all of that. Is that not on the agenda now?
No, that was never part of the plan. When they moved the people around, they moved into the existing space. We took some storage rooms in the existing building, some old file rooms, and made those offices. So the moving upstairs was not in the new part, but in the old part. So the new part upstairs, as we were talking about earlier, was always scheduled to just be for future growth and future needs, and not funded as part of.
Paula, can I say something?
Please do.
Paula?
Yes, go ahead.
So it's generally more cost effective to build shelf space, to go ahead and include the roof and stub out the electrical and plumbing and all of that, and then do the upfit at a later date when the space is needed. So that is actually a long-term planning tool, and is more cost-effective than going back and having to do an addition after the fact in whole form.
I totally understand that, but my concern is that, and I may be wrong in what I'm thinking, because it seemed like to me there's at some point in the past there was some future discussion that the social service department have on the side of that new building was running out of space.
Right. So
that was that kind of stuck in my mind as we were building this building. That at some point, we may have to utilize some of that some of the new building, second level, to alleviate some of the needed space.
That is correct, but just so I'll remind you too, with COVID, when COVID hit, and most of the people at social services are teleworking, and so there's a lot of people that are not even in the building now. There's less than 30 people in the building this last year, and now that we've been able to extend our teleworking capabilities, we don't know that the need is there right this moment for that expansion. We don't think that this is the right time, if you will. It's a lot of money for possibly a vacant office space with nobody in it. And like I said, we did a space analysis, and there is currently space in the existing structure for the current needs. Now, we're not saying that next year or year after that they won't have the need, but at this moment, there was not a pressing need to finish that space.
I totally understand that. I just want to make sure that my mind won't playing tricks on me.
We did talk about it, but we were talking future. We were talking several years out, not right this moment.
Okay.
But you were right. We did talk about it as a future project. It's just not on here again because we didn't, Social Services didn't request it this year.
I understand perfectly well. Thank you.
Can I make a request to add something? I'd really like to see the sheriff's annex down on the western side. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that I hear down my way is, about 15, 20 minutes away from up here. And if we can have something maybe at the old Ben Haven Elementary School, maybe utilize that space instead of it just sitting there. I know that they would need some space for like a jail, and I guess that'll be the big issue, just as like a holding cell, but I'm sure we can construct something like that. Maybe that'll give them a little bit more room also for what they need. Feel like we can use the resources we have and also provide more.
Okay.
And not a substation, like it was explained to me, I guess a substation is just a place for them to sit, and an annex is actually an operating site.
And I'll just say, to that point, that's the first I've heard of that in dealing with the sheriff or any of their requests. And my only concern there would be, if we do an early college, then we have young people in a playground on the site. Is that really a place that you want to house, a jail, have a jail? I'm not saying you wouldn't, but just think about the uses of that space. And we'd have to also check with planning and zoning of the use in that area, because right now it's educational is zoned educational. So just keep that in mind. There may
But
be
maybe
some.
we could look for another spot.
Okay, thank you. Just, this is the way that's the reason we're talking about it. Let's talk about this, and we can definitely look at other spaces. We have another opportunity in the Western Harnett area that we'll talk about at a future work session. And so there are just some opportunities coming up, so we can definitely find a space if not there.
Thank you.
Commissioner McCoy, I have one more. Has the sheriff, I know I have spoke to him in the past about putting cameras in those cars for the sheriff, for our deputies and all. Has there ever been any discussion about moving towards that?
Well, as a matter of fact, I approved a grant application yesterday for that very thing. So he is applying for a preliminary grant for in-car cameras.
Well, thank you.
So it just happened, I just knew about it yesterday, as a matter of fact. So
Like I told him when he came before, that is much needed here in Harnett County.
And they're going to start out, they're going to try to do it in phases, and the first phase, I can't remember how many cars it is, but it's not the whole fleet to start out with. He's going to phase it in as there's money available, grant funds. Yes, and he'll have to come back to you to accept the grant if they are awarded the grant.
Rank these 0 through 3. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
And if I understand, 3 is the top priority.
Can you advance to the next slide and show them the priority,
Oh, sorry. Yes, here you go, I'm sorry.
prioritization?
Yeah. The numbers are confusing us all.
Yeah.
Earlier it said 4.
I know.
So 0 is the new 4.
So sorry, yes, 0 is the new 4. And we decided to change it so that the more points equaled a higher score. We had it backwards in our first presentation, so that's why we changed it now, to make it more clear. 0 means no points, and 3 is the highest.
Not playing golf.
No. We're playing basketball, yep.
And let me ask one more question. Is there a timeline or something that it's imperative that we make that decision or make that rank today? Or is that something that we can take with us and work on and bring back
It's at your
possibly on
pleasure.
Monday?
We were hoping to get it today, only because the stuff is fresh on your mind. I know you want to think about it, and that's fine too. The only reason we were hoping to get one today was just so that we could start making sure that our priorities aligned with yours. But if you need time, that is definitely fine.
But I'm just asking the question. I don't know if my fellow commissioners feel strongly either way, but
In the budget.
since I have heard the presentation, anyway, for me, I think it would benefit me to be able to sit down and go back and look and have an idea of what that I'm confident about, what projects have funding sources identified, what don't, so on and so forth. But that's just me.
And that's, again, you can take a poll, and we'll do whatever the board so chooses.
Any feelings by any other commissioners?
Couple of days to do it,
Excuse me.
at least a couple of days.
I agree. I think you definitely need some time to do a little bit of research on some of these points, just to rank those. But I also wanted to see if, I'd like to discuss it amongst all of us. That's what we're here, and we're trying to see where exactly we're going to take this board in the future. So I'd like to make sure we're in line.
Would it be better to have the discussion after we rank it, after we get the
I think so.
total rank? Yeah, I agree with that.
So do you want,
So, Ms. Stewart, let's see.
we have
It's a regular meeting on-
we have a meeting on February 1st, which is Monday, regular meeting. You could discuss these again if you wanted to discuss them in open session. And then we have a work session on February 9th, and it's already getting pretty full, so.
Right. I was going to ask, how is the agenda?
pretty
Last
light.
time I think we talked for the first was not so full.
That's right, it's pretty light.
Right. So would you like to consider taking these, making our individual rankings, discussing them at our meeting on Monday?
Yes.
Will they have them total by Monday?
Well, we'd have
we have
to,
to
I guess
get
we could email that in.
Get it
and-
to us by Friday
Sure.
or
Or
Sunday
bring it by.
night, so that we'd have time just to run the calculation, that's all.
I mean, I still think after we discuss that, we're gonna probably I mean, I'm sure.
May tweak it some.
Exactly. I mean, I'd like to be open on other people's ideas on where they rank,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
So am I hearing the consensus that we take these and get our rank back to Ms. Stewart by Friday lunch at the latest, and then we can discuss the totals at our meeting on Monday?
Okay. I'm good with that.
Cole, you okay with that?
And you can have till Friday at 5. I mean, we're fine, we can run the,
Agenda, but I can run through it. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Well, if you want to go ahead and do it today, I can do that too.
No, we
So-
can do it. I mean, I don't have a problem with that, you know.
Okay. All right. Mr. Weatherspoon, you okay with that?
Yeah.
Mr. Nichol? Mr. Johnson? Okay. We'll have that to you, then y'all can total that on Monday and have a rank for us when we meet on Monday.
okay, that sounds great.
Thank you so much for Ms. McFadden and Lisa for the presentation, the explanation, answering the questions, overview. Appreciate that.
If you have any questions between now and then, just let us know, and we'll try to get it to you.
Thank you.
And we will go ahead and take a break now, if that's okay with y'all, for maybe a 10-minute break, and then come back and we'll jump into the Kimberly's part on fiscal policy.
All right, sounds good.
You know. Another copy of that.
Do what? Oh, I know, that was funny. Oh, well.
Did you hear it,
That's a print
Lisa?
market.
Did